June 24th, 2011. Finally found a job working with Zach at his uncle's place. A salvaging company, digging up boat parts and other junk from the river to make it safer. Stuff like that. It's not really my thing, but it's a job and I'm grateful for it. Met his uncle earlier today. His name's Walter. Really jovial and built like a concrete mixer. We got to talking for a while. Ended up liking me and gave me a position as a diver for his crew. Told him I never dived a day in my life, but he said he'll give me lessons over the weekend before I start Monday. Only weird thing is, I have to keep these journals. For company purposes, Walter says. I guess it's in order to track our work ethic and personal health on the job or something. Anyway, I haven't done anything like this since grade school, so maybe it'll be good for me. June 25th, 2011. We went out on the river earlier this morning, just me and him, in this small fishing boat. And before that, we spent a couple hours going through equipment, making sure everything worked. We must have spent an hour on the tanks alone. He says the worst thing is having a faulty tank. He went through a spiel of a guy he once knew who burst his lungs because he didn't check the pressure gauge of the tank. Horrible way to go, he said. Just popping like a balloon. After he told his story, he thought it was best we get it right. He showed me the ropes, how to fall backwards from the boat, proper swim techniques, and all that. It was exhausting, but at the end of the morning, he said I was a natural. I think he's just being nice. June 26th, 2011. This morning we worked on salvaging exercises. When we got out on the river, he took out a small bright orange pipe and threw it in the water. Told me to wait a few minutes, check through my gear again, and then dive. I spent ages looking for that damn pipe. The Mississippi's so thick with just mud and sludge, I don't know how anyone can see through it. Finally, I found it on the riverbed next to a submerged log and brought it back up. I didn't know he was timing me. When he showed me the stopwatch, he suggested I start lifting weights so I can carry heavier things back, in case the crank's broken. More work. June 27th, 2011. First official day on the job. All meet and greet with the rest of the crew. Typical run-of-the-mill, middle-aged strongbacks with mean faces but friendly spirits. They slapped me on the back, shook my hand, really welcoming. Afterward, we geared up and went on the river. Nothing exciting. Retrieved a few submerged logs from the communal boating sections, including a 40-foot sticking up right to the surface. Sent me and Zach to wrap chains around the trunk and started the crank. At the end of the day, we had some beers. Overall, nice start. June 28th, 2011. More logs today, and once again I was sent to reel them up. My diving partner was Thomas. When we wrapped the chain around a log, a pike dashed out from the hole and scared the hell out of me, much to the amusement of Thomas. He gave me shit when we got back up. June 29th, 2011. Today we found a sunken fishing boat. A few of us had to go in and push it up while someone worked the crank. When it surfaced, I looked it over and saw some hard gray buildup on the motor. I asked if it was coral and they told me coral doesn't form in the Mississippi, but they weren't sure what it was. June 30th, 2011. Slow day today. Nothing much to report other than Thomas sending me various pictures of pikefish. Checked over the equipment. Turns out someone doodled another pike on my tank. Ha ha ha. July 1st, 2011. Last day on my first week, and finally we get something more than logs and fishing boats. We got a call from the DNR saying there's a large runabout on the east bank we need to haul out. I dove in and surveyed the boat, trying to find the strongest point to attach the crank. Rotted wood's a pain in the ass. The left hull had a large hole. Probably tried to chance a rock bed and failed. I attached the crank and gave them the go-ahead. After we pulled it up, we had to drain it, remove all the loose materials before sending it to the junkyard. As I cleaned through, I found a video camera in the cabin. There was gray material covered over it, kind of like the kind I saw on the fishing boat a couple days ago. They said they knew a guy who could salvage the files to see what was on there in order to contact the owners of the boat and find them. July 1st, 2011, continued. It was my turn for tank duty after work, so I drew a duck on Thomas's oxygen tank to make it even. July 4th, 2011. No work today due to the holiday. Zach and Walter and I came in anyway to finish clearing out the boat so we could have more free time tomorrow. A duffel bag of clothes in the storage unit, some of them in kid sizes. Hopefully whoever steered that boat into a rock bed didn't have a kid with them. It's pretty stupid. July 5th, 2011. For helping him out yesterday, Walter gave Zach and me a half day. We laughed as the rest of the guys drove out into the river to haul off more logs. July 6th, 2011. Thomas and I were diving partners again today. He's since let up on the stupid pike jokes, but now whenever we're in the water, he tries to mess with me by pointing behind me as I watch him wrap the chain. Whenever I turn, I see nothing but an endless shade of murky water, with a few branches poking through the distance. He finds it funny, but it freaks me out a bit to turn around and see nothing there. I hope for some fish or something, but there's just a sprawl of nothingness, completely desolate. July 7th, 2011. And nothing much to report. We got a call from someone saying there's another large boat in the riverbed near the three-corner sandbar, about a mile off from where the last boat was. He said it's a Lakeview yacht, somewhat large and would require at least 2 days to salvage and surface. Walter said if anyone volunteered to work it this weekend, they would receive a bonus for the month. More money is always good. July 8th, 2011. The police called, said they needed help getting a pontoon out from the wax. Apparently, some guy got drunk and drove it into a life dock. Somehow managed to turn it over. They've been looking for the body, but in the meanwhile want us to get the thing out of the way. July 9th, 2011. Christ. Where to begin? Okay, so today we started working on the Lakeview job. It was 5 of us, me and Zach included. Some other guys Walter knew came in to help because of how large the thing was. We needed at least 4 people to stay with the yacht to salvage and drag it up, and another couple guys to explore area for any additional wreckage. Thomas and I opted to search around for anything else. We trekked along the riverbed and saw scattered fragments of wood, metal, placed them in a sack as we went along. We followed the trail of the wreckage for about a quarter mile until we reached a drop-off in the floor. It was hard as hell to see, but I made out the chains of an anchor near the end of the slope, so we continued on. I reached it first and tried to pull it out. Thomas watched me for a moment. Then he looked out into the abyss and suddenly pointed out. I flipped him off and continued working, but he tugged at my arm and kept pointing. I shook him off without much thought, and then he swam off behind me. The anchor was dug too far in, so I gave up and looked around for Thomas. I saw his fins disappear into the cloud of muddied water, followed him, and when I caught up to him, I prodded his shoulder, but all he did was point, so I looked. I saw a figure standing in the open riverbed facing us. July 9th, 2011, continued. There were no logs, no fish, nothing on this vast plain of riverbed. Just this figure looking out, an arm outstretched. I panicked, took frantic breaths. Thomas noticed and calmed me down, reminded me of Walter's popping balloon story using the hands to mimic a burst. He looked at me and nodded, motioned towards the figure and swam out. I didn't want to be left alone, so I followed. When we reached the figure, it didn't move. I reached out and touched its arm. Its skin was gray, hard, and rough. It was a statue. The details were intricate. Every crease in the clothing sculpted, every strand of hair and lashes on the eyes, plotted and sculpted with precision. It was so lifelike. We took a flagger out from our belts, swam to the surface, and marked the position of the statue before swimming back to our boat and telling the others what we found. By the time we got back, they had the yacht mostly surfaced when we told Walter what we found. He was interested, but told us we wouldn't have time to bring it up today. Best mark it on the map and give it a go tomorrow. After we finished with the yacht, he reminded us. July 10th, 2011. We rushed through the yacht work as fast as possible. Sunken boats are a dime a dozen, but a statue on the riverbed is something worth noting. Eventually, Walter agreed with us. So while the others worked on getting the yacht cleared for wreckage, we three went out to the flagger with another boat and went in. We wrapped the chain around its waist and cranked it up. When it got to the back of the boat, I had to help push it out while Walter pulled from the stern. We grabbed onto the wrist of the statue and ended up snapping off a finger. He said he could glue it back on. Then he saw the gray sludge spread over his palm. Sediment, he said. Wiped it on his jeans. He told me to grab the flagger because they're expensive to replace, and I said I did. But I left it there so I knew where to come back later. There may be more to see in that area. Some after-work projects to engage in. When we got back, we placed the statue in the back room. Placed the broken-off finger in a tray beside it. July 11th, 2011. The guy we sent the video camera to said it was too damaged to salvage any of the files. In fact, he told us he dropped it on his workbench and it just shattered. He also asked how to get the gray sediment off of his clothes. All we said is place it in a basin of soda water and baking soda and hope for the best. July 14th, 2011. The past few days I went back to the spot and dug around. I go in short intervals. It's hard to stay in that place for any longer than half an hour with the screen of muddy water blocking my view of the riverbed. On Tuesday I tried staying out for an hour to see what I could find, but the sun was going on and the last rays of light were drudging through the water and I felt exposed. Sometimes I looked out into the water and thought I saw a silver tail slithering off into the open, just out of the corner of my eye. I started to fuck with my own mind, I guess. Water snakes are prominent here, but aren't they usually black? Do they stay near the surface or do they die for their food sometimes? I wonder if fresh water is sustainable for most fish. Then I remember this is the Mississippi, a complete garbage drain for the Midwest. July 16th, 2011. I went into the back room to look over the statue, seeing as we haven't done anything with it since we put it there. I took a closer look at the details in its face and it seemed concerned, somewhat hesitant in posture. The arm points out to address something, but I wonder what. Getting artsy with these thoughts, it's just a statue. When I left the back room and sat down with the guys, Zach complained I'd tracked mud all over the floor. And looking at my shoe, there was something on the bottom. I retraced my steps and noticed a small pool of the stuff under where the statue's arm pointed out. Some sludge dripped from where the finger was. When I asked Walter about it, he guessed it was buildup from the material of the statue being submerged for so long. It sounded reasonable to me, because when I looked into the basin where the finger was, the same sludge formed around the bottom of it. July 17th, 2011. We went back to the place where we found the statue and discovered an old camera about a quarter of a mile to the east. It was coiled around the branch of a submerged tree. I brought it back with me and sent it to the guy who tried the video camera. Hopefully something comes up. July 18th, 2011. I realized I could cover more ground if I had someone to go with me. I asked Thomas if he wanted in, and he said sure. Recently, we've been getting bored at work, because Walter hasn't been looking for any jobs for us. He tends to keep to himself a lot now, says his arthritis is acting up. Bad hands, getting stiffer every day. Probably why he usually works the crank now instead of helping with salvage duty. July 18th, 2011, continued. The statue looks like it's losing color. I bet it needs to be preserved or something. Being out of its element for the past how many years is making it more fragile to the air. July 21st, 2011. Walter's been taking loads of medication for his hands. Complains he can barely move them anymore. Fingers too stiff to do anything. He works the phone mostly now. Occasionally joins us on the boat. July 23rd, 2011. Thomas and I have been going back to the spot for the last few days. It's always after work ends when everyone goes home, which is around 8 p.m. This only leaves us 1 hour of exploring, and when we stay a little later, it's hard to see anything. We decided if we wanted to spread out our search efforts, we need to start coming in before work at sunrise. July 23rd, 2011, continued. The statue's looking rough. It's been dripping more of the sludge from the broken finger. It looks like it's lopsided now. July 24th, 2011. The guy managed to get something from the camera. It said the film is mostly damaged, but he blew up a frame that was only partially exposed. The photo showed the arm of whoever was holding the camera, reaching out to run their hand from the waves of what I guessed was the back of the boat. July 27th, 2011. The second time we managed to get out at sunrise. Everything was so much clearer thanks to the better lighting, and we could see the open plain of the riverbed clearer than our last effort. After the last few trips, we searched the area until it ran dry. Nothing new to report, save for a few bits of trash. But we had a couple hours until work started, so we swam out a little further, and it paid off. There was a second drop-off about 1/3 of a mile from where we found the first statue. It dropped 50 feet, and we found ourselves in a large field of riverbed pushed through and found only motors and skeletons of fishing boats, torn upholstery, tatters of clothes snagged on submerged logs. The weeds started to get longer as we swam by. After a while, we reached a clearing. The water became thicker with mud. Thomas swam ahead of me, reached out for something and missed. He disappeared for a moment, leaving me alone in the open and roused in a vast cloud of muddied water. There was silence. I think I saw something whipped away to my left, but by the time I turned, all I saw was a crawling jet of gray powder. July 27, 2011, continued. When Thomas returned, I could see something in his eye, anxiety or excitement. I couldn't tell. He led me forward until I could see through the clouds of mud. There were several of them, scattered along the riverbed, each in a different position, each with different features and statures. As he led me forward, more appeared on either side. Some were holding hands or embracing. Others stood alone with eyes closed. We were in the center of a gathering of statues. They looked modern and just as if lifelike, as the first statue we found a couple weeks ago. We weren't sure what we stumbled upon, and all we could think to do was set up a flagger and tell everyone at work what we found. July 31st, 2011. We haven't seen Walter for ages. I asked Zach where he'd been. He told me my guess was as good as his. Last he heard, he went to the doctor about his hands. That was about a week ago. When we tried phoning him, we didn't get an answer, nor when we stopped by his house. Zach decided to put himself in charge while he figures all this out. August 3rd, 2011. It's been a week and we're still pulling statues from the water. We're running out of room in the storage area. Not a single one looks the same. Some of them are dressed in modern attire like t-shirts and blue jeans. Some are dressed in bathing suits that I remember seeing in films from the 50s. We tried to figure out where they came from, and the best conclusion we came up was a barge losing some of its cargo. I looked for any sign of the artist's signature or the works, but none of them had any other markings. Zach said he'll start calling around and seeing what he can find out. Meanwhile, the rest of us need to go back out to finish fishing them out of the river, you know? August 4th, 2011. The storage room smells awful. I told Thomas to keep an eye out for any dead rats. August 5th, 2011. We ran out of the room in the storage area, and at this point we have 35 statues lined up. So we have some of them in front of the shop on display until we can figure out what to do with them. The storage room still smells horrible. Thomas swears he couldn't find anything dead. There are no holes for anything to get in. Anyway, tomorrow we're heading out on the river just to fish out what we think is the last of the statues, which is just as well. I'm starting to feel uncomfortable around them. August 6th, 2011. We lost Thomas. I'm not even sure what happened, but we searched for hours and couldn't find him. It was all routine. Go in, get the statues, crank them up, call it a day. I was working the crank while Zach went down with Thomas to chain up the statues. They were in for half an hour until they gave me the tug to pull up the chains. This went on until we had 3 more statues. Then I sent the chains down and waited for another tug. After 20 minutes, nothing. Another 20 minutes. I thought we were looking for more, but earlier that day they said they only saw a few more. Finally, an hour passed and nothing. Just as I was about to dive, Zach surfaced with something large in his hands. He pushed it up to me, told me to grab it. It was covered with that gray sediment. And when I grabbed it, I saw it was an oxygen tank. I wiped away some of the stuff and saw a doodle of a duck on the base. I asked him where Thomas was, and he just shook his head and told me to call the police for a diving team. In the panic, I threw the oxygen tank aside and dialed the police. When I looked back, I saw the oxygen tank split open, one half intact and the other shattered to pieces. I remember wiping the sediment across my cheek to clear the sweat. I remember Zach staring down at me before I passed out. August 9th, 2011. They haven't found him. August 10th, 2011. My right hand is starting to turn stiff. It hurts to write. August 12th, 2011. This whole place smells like a slaughterhouse with spoiled meat. August 13th, 2011. One of the new guys tipped over one of the statues. It crumbled like wet paper and red sludge seeped over the ground. August 16th, 2011. I think about that photograph a lot. August 20th, 2011. They found Walter in pieces. August 22nd, 2011. Was it a gathering or a graveyard? August 23rd, 2011. Water snakes are red, black, brown, or gray, not silver. August 27th, 2011. I can't feel my face anymore. Well, ladies and gentlemen, wasn't that a horrifying story by Spadezy? If you enjoyed it, I'm going to leave a link to the story down below, so be sure to go give the author some love. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button, click subscribe, and the little bell so you can be notified when the next one pops up. And as always, my Darkness Militia, have a terrifying evening.